Welcome. My name is Jessie Davis. My pronouns are she and they. For people who are listening in rather than watching, I am a person in my late 20s with reddish long hair and glasses on. I'm sitting in my desk in front of a virtual background. I am a peer support specialist and a program coordinator at the South Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, otherwise known as the South Southwest MHTTC. I'm honored to be your host for this panel, which is titled Gender in Motion, a conversation about trans experiences. I want to thank our wonderful moderator and panelists for being here with us today, and we're going to introduce them in a moment. And a really big thanks to all of you for joining us. We truly hope you find today's presentation engaging and helpful in your work. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. The opinions expressed in this presentation are the views of our speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. All right, let's get started. We have an amazing moderator for today's panel. Danny Wilson has their bachelor's in mass communication from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and their master's in public health from St. Louis University. They have been working with children and youth for over a decade and have spent many years working in public health through youth councils and consulting with local health departments. Danny has lived experience in mental health care and spent their first year after grad school working as a youth engagement specialist on a system of care grant in the state of Missouri. They have a passion for learning and understanding more about youth mental health and specific experiences and interest in working in advocacy with the LGBTQIA+ community. Danny is a research specialist for the Missouri Institute of Mental Health. Danny, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to pass it off to you and the panelists.
All right. It's great to be here, and thank you so much, Jessie, for having me. For those of you who are listening in, I am a non-binary guy in my late 20s with brown short hair and sparse facial hair and wearing glasses and a gray and black shirt. I'm going to go ahead and have all of our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Kanoa.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Kanoa Arteaga. My pronouns are he and they. For those of you listening in, I'm a light-skinned, mixed-race, transmasculine person in my mid-30s with short brown hair, and I'm sitting in front of a white background wearing a striped shirt and glasses. And I will pass it over to Ari.
Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to share this space with y'all today. My name is Ari Luna. My pronouns are she, her. For those of you listening in, I am a light-skinned Black and brown woman, trans woman, who is sitting at a desk, and I'm thick with a couple C's. So I'm very happy to be here. I'll pass it over to Ahmed.
I'm really excited to be here as well. My name is Ahmed Abjarade, they, them pronouns. I'm an Indigenous Palestinian with olive skin and gorgeous curls up to almost my shoulder, wearing metallic butterfly earrings and an orange shirt that reads a bell hooks quote that says, "Sometimes people try to destroy you precisely because they recognize your power, not because they don't see it, but because they see it and they don't want it to exist." In the background are just various works of art.
I'm going to also take a moment to preemptively apologize for my dog. She is sleeping right now-ish, but she tends to take really inopportune times to yell at me. So if that happens, I'll mute myself, go yell at her, and come back. So I did get a question in the question box that I kind of want to go over first. The use of pronouns is so that we all know how to refer to each other, basically. There are some people who you might see and think that they use one set of pronouns, and they might not. So whenever you share your pronouns, even if you think that they're obvious, it helps us know how to refer to you. But us sharing our pronouns also helps you like know how to refer to us. It's a really good way to just find out how to refer to someone. Yeah. I think I said the simple answer and then worked myself out of it. Anyway,
Could I just follow up about that?
yeah,
Maybe
totally.
just since, considering the theme of the panel, right? I think cisnormative culture tells us that we can make assumptions about the pronouns that people use based on the way that they look. And so we're starting off this panel asking folks to share your pronouns with the group. We're sharing ours as a way to disrupt that idea that we can and should make assumptions about how we refer to one another in the third person.
All right. So without further ado, I'm going to go into our questions. And this will be largely guided with a rough backbone. But if you do have any other questions, there are members of us watching the Q&A box. So first, I'm going to ask you to tell me a little about your experience moving through the world as a trans person. What are the best and worst of your experiences?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks, kind of in preparation to this. And the best words that I could really come up with in terms of how I experience life as a trans person is really kind of like seen as an anomaly and also as invisible, which sort of contradict one another because it seems as if they can't really coexist, but they kind of do. And so walking day to day, whether through work, whether personal life, wherever it is, and I'm in a space where I don't have many trans people around me. So it's predominantly cis individuals. And the culture I'm kind of surrounded by, I'm currently in Northern Ireland, doesn't necessarily have too much awareness, I guess, in terms of transness and kind of an understanding into everything that we'll be talking about that's kind of mainstream. And so walking around every day feels kind of like that scene from like The Matrix where you're kind of out of norm, right? Where you're in an anomaly and you're not supposed to really exist. And people around you kind of recognize that. And so in a sense, they start kind of avoiding you. And so you kind of become invisible when it comes to your trans identity. And so it's kind of interesting of like, you'll start becoming defined by anything other than transness. Right. And so it's like, okay, well, you're this identity or you're that identity instead. And that's kind of what gets centered. Now, at the same time, that sounds like it's awful, but in reality, it also means that as a trans person, I also have access to everything that mainstream society doesn't want us to really be connected with and address. And so walking around, even within that sense, feeling that sense of being an anomaly allows me to kind of move beyond that cisnormative culture and kind of beyond all of different identities of like marginalization and the systems of oppression that have kind of created the mainstream culture that we have. I'm able to connect with people and just connect with myself in a way that that I feel like I wouldn't necessarily have been aware of if I didn't have that identity. And so you kind of get a little bit of both where you're seen as different, as an anomaly, you're seen as invisible at times because people can't really comprehend your different identities. But because of that, you're really able to move way beyond it, right? You're able to connect with people genuinely, both work-wise, professionally, personally, in every single way. And so for me, that's usually like the best part is that I get to live in a world that doesn't really exist for the vast majority of people because I'm kind of tapped into that differently.
Awesome. Definitely. Do either of you, Ari or Kanoa, do you have anything to add to that? Or you feel like they got that?
Yeah, I think they got that. I did want to add like one thing, which is just that it's like I think like being sort of categorized as like other, becoming other is it's in some ways like liberating, and you get to see the world like you sort of get to peek beyond the veil some things. But I don't know, something about this question just brought up this feeling of like Sometimes it's also just like scary being other, and like especially when I think about my experiences like as a black trans woman, like, and you know, I also have like light skin privilege, but like I think the outcomes for us are atrocious and awful, and often end in horrible ways. And so that's like never lost on me when I'm moving through the world. But at the same time, I'm also remembering that people are scared of other because of how like powerful other is and like what other is like capable of. And so I don't know, just like those things stick out for me when I hear this question.
Definitely. Kanoa, do you have anything to add, or do you feel like they got it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I really appreciate the perspectives that have been shared so far. I think that, you know, for me, as someone who has access to a lot of masculine privilege being read in the world as like a cis man, I think that, um, you know, I try to be really mindful of, you know, the privileges that I have access to, and try and really interrogate the moments when I'm being invited into some of the worst parts of masculinity as you know, a trans person. And so I, you know, I feel like, you know, trans people are just like so uniquely positioned to deconstruct and then reconstruct gender better, because, you know, so much of our experience is really, we're really fighting for autonomy in so many ways. And so it means that we get to have these really great exploratory sort of conversations around like, okay, this is masculinity has looked like historically, and this is what I want it to look like for me and for the trans generations that come after me. And so I, you know, I really try and lean into um, acknowledging those points of like pain and trauma that my people have moved through or that my people have caused, and trying to use that as the lens that informs the way that I envision a future for myself and for generations that will come after.
Awesome. Those are all amazing answers. Um, so our next question that we're going through, and I do see some questions popping out in the chat. I'm probably going to ask those toward the end, so I know that we have time to make sure we get through a lot of our stuff. So our next question is, what does gender euphoria feel like to you? What makes you experience it? And for those who don't know, so a lot of trans people experience what's called gender dysphoria, or the feeling of being like, the way that I describe it is like a feeling of incongruence with your gender. I don't know if anyone else has a better definition, but basically dysphoria is icky gender feelings, as my roommate would put it. um, on the flip side of that, we have gender euphoria, which is really great feelings about your gender. Like, you know, maybe somebody used the right pronouns for me repetitively that day, or maybe, you know, I'm just like feeling my new shirt, or like, I don't know, when I dress in floral stuff, then I feel like that's gender euphoria for me, skincare and floral shirts. So basically, gender euphoria is happy gender feelings. So I will define that before I ask. So yeah, again, what does gender euphoria feel like to you, and what makes you experience it?
I can kick this one off. I I think gender euphoria for me feels like sort of the word like intoxication is coming up in my head, but like just being sort of like completely enveloped by like um this just like liberation of just like existing in like yourself as you are, like outside of the confines of like what this world has tried to create and put you in, and like at some moments it feels like you've shed some of that like baggage and pain of like getting to the place that you're at. But yeah, I think it feels like freedom, and the potential for like I think like Noah was saying earlier, like reconstructing like what like gender and like what is possible in this world, and sort of or even just like abolishing it altogether and just like, yeah, what does this world look like now without without these confines? Um, and I think what makes me experience that is I think that there's a lot of moments of like really, for me at least, there's a lot of moments for really struggling with like people's expectation of like what gender should be for me, and like especially in regards to like cis heteronormativity, and like um and so when I'm able to like, yeah, just be outside of that and really just sit in myself, um I think that's when I experience those moments. And again, I want to go back to the order of like just like freedom. It feels like I am like liberated, and it feels like I am free and capable of just like being myself, which is like one of the most revolutionary acts in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, Kanoa.
So doing the Zoom two-step. Yeah, a lot of those things resonate with me. I think that you know, uh, for me, uh, gender euphoria sort of has like a couple of components to it. It's both about finding connection and community with like other folks around me, other trans folks who might be seeing similar challenges or triumphs and struggles, right? Like having someone to like commiserate with about getting misgendered at the doctor, or experiencing gatekeepers in mental health care. All of those little slights are really important to have community around. And then I think the other really important part for me too is being able to contextualize my experience within a history of transness that has always existed, right? So really searching my own lineage of my people and where my people came from, and searching for those examples of gender euphoria, or for folks from Hawaii, like we had categories for gender well outside of the binary prior to colonization, and connecting and contextualizing my own identity within that lineage is so helpful for me to have really solid ground to stand on, to know, I've always been here, and there's something really, really timeless about, yeah, like knowing that your people have always existed, and really resisting that erasure that happens in otherwise cisnormative culture. Yeah. Ahmed, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely second everything that's been said. I think for me, I often feel gender euphoria, specifically around others, when I don't have to negotiate or force my acceptance. I'm a fairly charismatic person, and so I can educate folks left and right. I do this for a living, right? I'm a consultant, and I can have all the conversations I need to. And also, it is so nice when I don't have to, right? When people automatically don't assume gender and utilize proper pronouns, um, and it's just there's safety, right? There's a sense of belonging that exists within that. And so to me, the gender euphoria, a lot of it is just around belonging. I specifically mentioned that this is around people because oftentimes I'll feel gender euphoria within myself, right? When I'm alone, far away from anyone else, is the time when I feel it the absolute most, because that interference doesn't really exist from others.
Definitely. We're loving these responses so far. Um, So our next question is, what does it look like for you to truly be seen and validated in your identity? And Kanoa, this one's to you first.
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. This is a hard question. Gosh, I mean, I think a lot of things that have already been touched on, right? When, as Ahmed was saying, when we don't have to negotiate our acceptance or recognition as whole, full people. I think that some other things that come to mind for me is, you know, when folks are willing to move with me in my gender journey, I think that that is also really validating, right? Like when, um, you know, I get to have conversations with other folks and I get asked, how are you feeling in your body today? How are you feeling in your gender today? Has anything changed about your gender since the last time I saw you? How are your pronouns feeling you right now? Are there any changes there? Are you thinking of exploring different pronouns? Have you heard new pronouns that sound exciting or resonate for you? Right. I think like when people, you know, both meet me where I'm at, but also hold space for the fact that I may not be there always, and that is subject to change at any time, and they are down the ride, that is validating for me. I think especially as you know, someone whose expression tends to like lean on the more like masculine side, and I can you know, sometimes be like pigeonholed in
And Kanoa froze.
Yes, he did. Is everyone else? We have movement from everyone else. All right. I don't know. Do one of you want to take it next until he's unfrozen?
Yeah, I can go. I was listening like so intently to Kanoa that I like almost forgot what the question was. Um, I think for me, in terms of like truly being seen and validated, it's almost like I have to be seen entirely outside of identities and just as a human being. And I kind of really struggle with this because so often we, at least for me, right, in my personal life, um, I won't necessarily always be seen and validated for all of the identities I carry, right? And so it kind of becomes like a give or take. It's there will be people who see me as a Palestinian, and others who will see me as a Muslim, and others who will see me as disabled, and others who will see me as living with all the mental health challenges that I live with, and others will see me as like a global South citizen, and others who will see me as like a refugee and an immigrant, and then as a queer person, and then as a trans person. And it's so rare to have people truly see you for everything that you are. Um, and I feel like the discourse around conversations are often very specific in terms of how we can be seen. That it kind of eliminates our certain spaces from truly being able to belong within them. So like as an example of that, some of like the greatest loved ones that I have cannot get pronouns right? Like they've worked on it, they've struggled with it, versus like other loved ones who have gotten it from like day one, and it was never really a question. And it's not that the first group don't see me, it's that it becomes much more complex. And I choose for those individuals in particular to make an exception and still honor them and see the love that they invest in me, and I get to invest back into them. but it's really rare for all of the identities to be kind of validated. And for me, at least within the identities that I have and the intersectionality that I have, to truly be seen for all of it. But oftentimes actually being seen really goes beyond all of those different things. It goes beyond each of those identities. It goes beyond that intersectionality. And it's just being in a space where you're just honored for everything that you are on an emotional level versus in terms of how people refer to you and things like that. So I kind of struggle with this one.
All right, Kanoa, you found your way back. Do you feel like is there anything that you want to say to finish up?
What was the last thing you heard me say? I'm so, yeah, it's on hot days, I'm like fighting with my internet.
I don't know.
That's okay. I'll pass it to whoever wants it.
All right, Ari, you were next. If you have anything to offer to that, or if you'd like, if you'd like to talk or no.
I would just echo what Ahmed was saying about like, I really I feel like supported and looking for the exact language of the question, like, or like seen and validated in my identity when it's all of my identities, but when it transcends that to just being like, I'm just a person that people like, that's seen with like seen and cared with like love and care, and I just get to be the totality of myself, I think, is when I feel like sort of seen and validated the most, which is really hard to come by, I think, and sometimes makes for me at least, unexpected moments when that happens with folks that I wouldn't expect it to. So yeah, I think I would just echo that.
It makes total sense. All right. We are coming in on our next question. There is, I was like, where are we? And I think, Ahmed, you actually, this was your question and ended up being with you on the list. So when was the first time you truly felt seen by someone who wasn't trans themselves?
Yeah. I guess in terms of being seen as a trans person in particular, I would have to say when my younger sister, who is 11 years younger than me, and I think she was like 14 at the time, she just called me out of the blue and was like, what pronouns would you like me to use for you? And we had never had the conversation. We'd never, I mean, I've been public about being non-binary for quite a while, but we had never had that kind of conversation. It was just completely out of the blue. And she's one of the very, very, very few non-trans individuals who has never gotten it wrong. I don't think anybody else, literally like in the world that I've interacted with, has ever gotten it right 100% of the time, except for her. And it was just a really incredible experience, especially with someone I had like helped raise and someone that means a lot, right? And it was just a very beautiful interaction. But beyond that, for like various identities and just being seen as a human being, I remember the very first time I ever felt seen. I was 7 years old, and it was actually my second grade teacher, and I barely knew English at the time because we had like just immigrated to the US at the time, like a year prior, and all the teachers had basically like completely given up on me. They like completely just discarded me and just basically said I passed. But nobody ever took the time to actually teach me English, right? Or like, or really bother with anything. And she was the first person that was like, no, like, Ahmed, you can do this. And I don't remember anything else about that year, right? Or even like the year before, the year after. I don't remember most of my childhood, but I remember her voice to this day, right? Saying those words. And to me, that was being seen for everything that I am, with all the possibilities that existed within me. And I remember at the time, I think she had mentioned like, it's okay if you don't do well, right? It's not about that. It's just that you can do whatever. And that to me was like the first time that I was truly seen just as a human, right? It wasn't in terms of gender or my race or nationality or anything else. It was just as a human being seen with those unlimited possibilities. And she was actually the person that got me into peer support in the first place, years and years and years and years later. I'll stop there.
All right, Ari, Kanoa, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think of like, yeah, I think the first time that I felt truly seen by somebody who wasn't trans themselves was when I was hanging out with this person at the time who had sort of been on this like on my journey with me from sort of like exploring my initial like when I first came out as like non-binary and then like later as like a trans woman. But I think there's this really moment that I still like really appreciate. It was very special to me, where we sort of like sat down like on this little sort of like drainage area. There's like all this graffiti everywhere, and it was really pretty. And I just like pulled out this like list of like names, and I was just like, I want to think through like which one of these feels right. And we like went down a super long list and talked about all of them and like talked about which ones would feel right, which ones wouldn't. And we finally got to Ari, and it just felt so right. But just to have this person there who like who wasn't trans themselves be there and just be so like unconditionally supportive, I think was the first time that I felt like truly seen by somebody who wasn't trans.
Yeah, I'm like going through the Rolodex of trans memory and trying to remember these sweet moments that y'all are describing, if I've had ones that are similar. You know, honestly, I came into my transness in my mid-20s, which was right around the time that I was getting to know and meeting my partner, who's a cis woman. And I honestly think that that was one of the first times when I really felt seen and supported fully and so holistically by someone who wasn't trans. I really saw this person, you know, reflect when I asked her to reflect on places where our experiences were different, and you know the various privileges that she might have had access to. I saw her advocate for me when I needed advocate for me.
Oh, he was right there too. And he was the last one to go to. All right. I will take, we can go ahead actually. Let's see, where are we? So we're gonna move kind of into a discussion about peer support, and how that can, you know, work and simultaneously be kind of difficult whenever you're working in peer support, as well as whenever you're receiving peer support. I know I've seen a couple different things that it's been, you know, up to the safety of the person providing peer support. But I will start, let's see. Oh yeah, with what have you learned about peer support in your experience as a trans person? Ari, that's to you.
Yeah, so I work at Trans Lifeline, and we have hotline that does a lot of peer support. And I will say that this is not, I do not work on the hotline, and this is not like my personal area of like I don't know. Yeah. but I think that what I've seen, like, and like what I've learned about peer support in my experience as a trans person, is that peer support is so often, I think, about trying to get as close to that experience of like seeing somebody just like a person and like supporting them and being there with them like in solidarity, um, as much as, and like advocating and all those things, but like, yeah, trying to get to that place of like this person is just like is a person. And I don't mean that in like the colorblind like bullshit way. Like I mean that in like I've like reflected and thought about this and like engaged and analyzed my stuff, and I've gotten to a place where like I hold all this person's like stuff, all their identities, and like and we're moving a step beyond that to just like this is the homie, like this is I'm in this with them. And so I think my experience with like, being a trans person, that's sort of what I've learned. Sorry, they're doing construction out here. But, yeah, I'll pass it to, I don't know if Kuno wants to go and wrap up what they were saying earlier. Or Ahmed, if you want to take this one.
Ahmed, go ahead.
I can go. Yeah, so when I first found out about peer support, I think I was like,
What do you do when everyone freezes? All right, Kanoa, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine. I'm gonna try being off video and see if that helps.
Okay. So we're currently talking about what have you learned about peer support in your experience as a trans person?
Yeah, I can try and answer this one. You know, I'm remembering some of my earliest work as a youth advocate, working with LGBTQ foster youth in the Bay Area. And I remember just over and over again, I would have the same sort of experience with the young people that I was working with, where it became so clear that what they needed from me was someone to believe them. And for me, that meant acknowledging or offering to them, you know, I see you in all of your identities and I believe you, right? And no matter how that changes or transforms over time, I'm going to be with you on that journey. And so I had to sort of develop uh, my own guiding mantras that helped me really stay grounded in that commitment that I was making to my young people. And I just remember saying to myself over and over again, you know, what I can probably think of a time when I was a young person and I needed someone to say, hey, I see you and I believe you, right? And I think that we can all probably think about a time when we were young people and how impactful it would have been for an adult to say to us, I see you and I believe you, and your experience and your identities are real and they're valid, right? And we probably remember that because of times when adults didn't come through and say that, right? And so we literally have the opportunity to change the course of history, to change someone's trajectory just based on that one small intervention that is literally so easy, right? It doesn't take much to just say, you know, I'm gonna make the choice to say, like, I see you and I believe you, and your experiences and your identities are valid and real.
Definitely. Ari, I feel like you you said something first. So where everybody has said something on that question, correct? Yes. Okay. All right. So Kanoa, this one's to you as well. What are the strengths that peer supports can practice in working with trans people?
Man, this is a hard question. Like, who came up with these questions? We came up with these questions. um, what are the strengths that do you think you could provide a little bit more context about like what this question is asking?
I feel, to me, I would say you can do it one of two ways. The first being like, what are some strengths as a person that will help you as a like a potentially a cis peer support working with a trans youth or young adult, or just what are things that you can practice in order to be a better peer support whenever your client is trans.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Danny. Yeah, I mean, I think that for anyone who is entering the field of peer support, you're here because you recognize that the world is a hard place for many different people for many different reasons. And so I think that there are a couple of things that come to mind. One is doing your homework, right? Really getting an understanding of just how different the world is for trans people, right? Not asking the trans clients that you're working with to be your resource for that education, but actually saying, you know, I recognize that the world is different for you, and I am going to take it upon myself to do a little bit of that homework so that the next time that something comes up for you, I am better resourced to know how to show up for you in that moment. I'm also guessing that most people are in peer support because for them, empathy is a real superpower. And I really think that when we're talking about being in right relationship to one another across differences of race, class, gender, disability, etc., empathy really is a superpower when it comes to figuring out how to really make sure that those relationships are really grounded in mutual respect, right? And when I think the moments when I've seen empathy use really well in peer support, it's been when folks haven't rushed in to fix a thing, but they've been willing to actually sit in the more painful parts of someone's experience. And they've been willing to say, gosh, I can really see you're hurting right now. I can really see that the world really sucks right now. And I'm gonna sit here with you as long as you are feeling this feeling. And I can guarantee you that it won't be forever. And you know, as soon as like you're ready to start exploring what stepping out of this place looks like, I'll be right there with you. But until that time comes, I'm also here to sit with you in the hard stuff too. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything from the other two that you would like to say? Oh, you unmuted already, Ahmed.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think in the previous question, I kind of froze a little. And so I feel like for me, it's kind of the two answers kind of go hand in hand, where I was sharing that when I first found peer support, it was like the greatest thing ever. And I was like, all like marginalized communities need to have like peer support everywhere, right? And like, this is the answer to everything. And then I think along the way, what I really learned is that even though peer support as a model is inclusive of us, of all of us, no matter like which identities we're carrying, in reality, the practice isn't always so. And so along the way, I've kind of learned that even though we have all these amazing strengths, right? We have that mutuality, we have the empowerment, we have just honoring people for everything that they are, right? Like that is literally what we do. We literally go out and go and say, right, that we're like not experts in anybody else's lives except our own, that we can never actually fully comprehend another person's experience. And our job is to just to listen, to honor people's experiences and to be there. Unfortunately, that doesn't always necessarily happen. Right. And so over the years, I've kind of went like back and forth of like, I was like, whoa, no, peer support is not ready yet. And I really want to send that message today of that, unfortunately, in the vast majority of peer run spaces, they're not trans inclusive. And inclusive is like the bare minimum, right? But there are so many missing gaps along the way. Now, at the same time, peer support as a practice, as a model for everything that we do, right? In terms of just being with one another, has always been inclusive of everything, has always honored that you're going to refer to me in the way that I want to be referred to. It's always honored that I can literally go like create a completely different name, right? That right, not saying like I'm going to change my name, right, because of gender, but specifically I can tell you a pen name, right, just for you, because I don't want you to know my name. I can give you a stay alive name. And our jobs as peer support specialists are to still honor that, to honor every single experience. I can tell you I was born in Mars. It doesn't matter, because you honor me as a person. That is my reality. That is where I am. And so gender would be so easy, right, to truly honor that. Pronouns would be the easiest of things. Ethically speaking, all of those things are just ethics for us as peer support specialists. And so for me, like, all the strengths already exist within that model. And it's just a matter of us really kind of going back into that model and really reclaiming it versus really moving it towards heteronormativity and cissexism and all of the other systems of oppression that exist. And that's work that each of us can do.
Awesome. Let's see, I think everybody, yes, I think everybody went. All right, so this was something that I know in R and Kanoa, I know you missed that meeting, but I'm guessing that this, so this is a very broad topic question, so you can feel free to just let the word intersectionality run the whole thing. But specifically, how do you feel that peer support can help to address the intersectionality of culture and identity? And Ari, you were the one that was going to kick this off.
Nice. This one's a good one. Yeah, how do I feel peer support can help to address the intersectionality of culture and identity? I think that there's a lot about I don't want to say the same thing that I said earlier, but I do think that there's the piece about just like honoring who somebody is, and really meeting somebody where they're at, and also allowing that person to have like autonomy in their choices and actions, and how they want to proceed with different whatever like support they're seeking, and all that type of stuff. And so I don't know that I have a ton of stuff to add to this from what I've said earlier. But I do think there's a lot from like the other end, like that I think like peer support needs to address its approach to like culture and identity, like Ahmed was saying earlier. Like I think some of these models like aren't quite ready to support like trans people specifically, but also like the intersections of like trans identities that can exist, especially in regards to like race. And so I think, oops, yes, that's what I would say that I think I see the biggest sort of gap is in that sort of field of folks not taking the time to do their homework and being prepared to go in and support folks and meet them where they're at. So I don't know if that was rambly, but that's what I got right now.
All right, nobody, oh wait, yeah, Kanoa, you already unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to follow that up and just say that, you know, I think that when it comes to, I think that I see a lot of mental health professionals get stuck in sort of an all or nothing approach, right? Where our spaces, our interventions, completely intersectional and you know, like completely vetted by a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and if they're not, then they're not worth doing. And I think that that prevents a lot of people from even starting, and so they just never start. you know and so I think that, like, I want to hold space for all of the things that aren't currently working, right? Like the lack of trans inclusiveness in peer support spaces. And I think I also want to really encourage folks to find the smallest thing that you can do today, right? If it means putting your pronouns in your email signature, putting your pronouns on your work badge if you're having to go into work and still work with folks in person, asking your clients for their pronouns or how they're feeling about their gender. There's always something, there's always a bare minimum starting point that we can ask folks to do. And then it's about finding really excellent collaborators who are at least like on the same page with you, right? You don't have to be, you don't have to have a fully fleshed out like plan for the rest of the year. But if you go to your coworker who also has some understanding of trans identities, and you convince 5 of your other coworkers to put your pronouns in your email signature, and then 5 of their coworkers, it can really snowball from there. So I just really want to encourage folks to walk away from this space really taking to heart what is the first smallest step that you can make today, because that really is just those are also important interventions to be thinking about.
Yeah, so just to kind of go off of that, definitely second everything that's been said. I know I always tell, especially like whenever I'm training others to become certified peer support specialists, I will always tell everyone that unless you can get my pronouns right, I will not come see you as a peer support specialist. Like, that is my bare minimum. If we can't even get pronouns right, you don't need to pronounce my name right, but like if we can't get pronouns right, this just can't work. I did want to just mention something in terms of like that intersectionality that we've been talking about. And one of the most critical things, and I feel like it's already inherently a part of peer support, but I feel like it's not always necessarily a part of the practice, is that we're always trying to honor people's experiences and their stories and everything that they are, right? And oftentimes what ends up happening is, because we get little bits and pieces here and there, we start formulating our own stories about individuals and making assumptions about who they are and what their needs are and how we can support them. None of that is real, right? No one actually knows anything about anybody else's life. Yesterday, I was actually a part of a meeting, and it was kind of like a training, and I had my breakout group. And everyone was constantly talking about the need for education and the need for us to understand history and to understand what everyone's lived experience is like. And I was like, hold on, like, no, right? You will never know every single person's experience. You will never even know a single person's experience, right? It's so complex and it's so much. And so I will tell you all what I told them yesterday of embrace ignorance. You do not know. I do not know anything about anybody else, right? All I can do is just be there for individuals in the ways that they tell me they want me to be there for them. I can do some of the bare minimum, right? I can get pronouns right. I can, like what Kanoa said, right? In terms of putting pronouns in like our email signatures and things like that, right? I can be mindful of the posters and things like that I have in my office and make sure that they are inclusive of everything. But in the end of the day, I will still know nothing, right? And so if I work with you as your peer, right, and you see my hair and my earrings and my pronouns and all that kind of stuff, and you assume that gender is my biggest thing that I want to work on, you'll be very sadly mistaken, right? Because gender to me is a really immense identity within my life, within my intersectionality. But I have 7 other identities of marginalization, and more than half of them take precedence over gender because those ones can kill me immediately. Gender doesn't necessarily kill me everywhere that I am, right? And so, but I get to determine that. And for other people, it's going to be the opposite. For 2 weeks from now, I could be in the opposite space, right? And so really always taking that step back, embracing that ignorance of that we will never know. All we know is our own experiences, and we can always just ask, how can we best be there with you?
Awesome. I love that. Sorry, I was making sure I was looking at. So we do have a few questions coming through the Q&A. And I will start going through those after our last two questions, if everyone's okay with that. And if you want to, panelists, if you're not answering something and you want to go, and then you can message me and let me know which one you want to take. You can do that. Otherwise, I can just start rolling on them whenever we get done. So this is kind of a culminating question. So you can give me a small or big answer. But what does it feel like to be trans in a world that can seem to be dominated by cisgender people? And then Kanoa, I think that one was yours to start off with.
Yeah. Gosh, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, you know, I think it's a mixed bag, like a lot of identities, right? I think there are certainly times when it feels really powerful. I feel part of a really amazing club that not a lot of people are a part of. I mean, a lot of people are a part of, but certainly more than we think, probably. And then there are other times when it feels like I am being excluded from a club that has access to, you know, unearned privileges that would be really nice and would make my a lot easier if I didn't have to think about, you know, certain things associated with being trans. You know, yeah, I don't know. I think that what makes it bearable is like really a commitment to finding people like me, both those that are here with me today and those who have passed, and really acknowledging the pathways forward that have been paved by especially indigenous folks in North America, you know, living on stolen land, really thinking about, you know, all of the ways that we are able to exist today, in our bodies and in our gender because of the folks who have come before us, and especially thinking about those who have been persecuted because of their gender, right? So that's my answer. This one's a hard one. I'm gonna toss it over to Ahmed and Ari.
Ari, do you want to go?
Sure, I can go. Yeah, oops, actually airing out. I think, yeah, I don't know. We wrote this question was, we wrote this to sort of say that can seem to be dominated by cisgender people, and it's definitely just dominated. And I think it's I don't know. It's there's a lot of like lovely moments, and there's a lot of really special like community that doesn't happen like outside of this world, I think. But it's hard. It is really hard, like accessing services, getting like the care that you need, like whether you're when you're seeking like gender care services, like they're not always easily available. And if they are, like does the provider treat you well? And that's like not a that's like a don't I don't know. And then if you add in other like identities that are marginalized or oppressed, like you get it just gets harder from there. And so I don't know. I think what Kanoa said a word that really stood out to me, which was bearable. And I think like there's a lot of moments of like really, it's really challenging, which is why that some of like these positions like the support structures like peer support are so important, because having somebody who's there for you, for all of you, um, in a way where they're doing, or somebody's honestly, earnestly doing their best to support you, I think goes such a long way. Because you don't always, I think you don't always, and sometimes rarely get that, like as a trans person from like a not from like non-trans people. And so I think, yeah, I think it's crucial to do the job and like do it as best you can.
Yeah, I think. Oh,
Good.
yeah, I was just going to say that I definitely agree with all of that, and it's definitely a hard question. I think for me, and I was reflecting on this a little while ago, where I was having a conversation with a friend who is a cis woman, and she was talking about not feeling safe in various spaces. And I remember like reflecting, and she thought that I would feel safe like all the time, even though she knows me fairly well, but specifically because like I don't lock my door like in my house and things like that. And and I was like, no, actually, like I don't really remember the last time I've truly felt safe. And so I don't really bother with locking my door, because I don't think that locking my door is going to save me, right? I don't not dress up the way I want to dress up, and wear the things that I want to wear, and be the way that I want to be in spaces, because I'm terrified all the time, because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what I'm going to be wearing. It doesn't really matter how I present myself to the world, how I show up. And not just because of transness, but because of all the identities that I carry, right? Even in a space where I'm safe because of one identity, I will not be safe for others. And and so being in that sense of lack of safety, it's almost like refreshing to an extent, where you move beyond it, because there is nothing that can actually guarantee any of our safeties. And to me, that's what it's actually like, just being trans in this world, is always not being safe. And I say that not from a, oh my God, everything is the absolute worst, right? And I'm always terrified and all that kind of stuff, which is true. But it's also from a space where it's also like you get to live beyond it, right? Where you recognize that that's not what it is. And so you might as well just live your life wholeheartedly in every single way that you actually want to, which even like a lot of the people around me are so terrified to do that. They're not scared of the things that I'm scared of. They're not scared of walking out in public. They're not scared of showing up to a board meeting, right, and being misgendered by people who have known you for years, right, who are doing queer and potentially even like trans work. They're not scared of those things. They're scared of losing their life and things like that, in ways that for me are never preventable, right? And so I get to go and live my life in a way that a lot of the people around me don't get to. And so I view that as kind of like a blessing of, yes, I am scared, and also I get to fully self-actualize. I get to be everything that I am wherever I am in the world, in a way that a lot of people can't really even comprehend. And so there's beauty and a really negative side to it, but that to me is a lot of what that experience is like.
That's awesome. I mean, those are awesome answers, is what I meant by that, All right. So our last question, and then we'll be on to see if we can squeeze in some of the audience questions. But the final question is, how does cis-normative culture affect how you navigate the world around you? And if you feel like you've already answered this, then feel free to just say that. You're looking at me like, yep, I already did that.
Yeah, I feel like I have. So I'll let Kanoa or Ari take that.
Yeah, Ahmed, just hearing you talk a little bit about safety, and I think that, as we're sort of asking our like cis peers to take on a little bit more work in order to balance the scales a little bit, right, of peer support and to do their homework. I think there's also this like really important like question of, you know, ultimately when cis folks are having to, you know, make eye contact with their ignorance, their gaps in knowledge, right? It's ultimately going to bring up some discomfort. And I think and the way that I've seen cisnormative culture show up in that dynamic is where cis folks then like center themselves and they center the discomfort that they're feeling in that journey. And I think that if I were to like challenge any like cis folks here in this webinar today to like disrupt that a little bit, it would be to really like put what you're experiencing on a scale, right? Like look at a scale of like discomfort to harm, and really take a moment to like deeply reflect on, okay, when I'm being told by a trans person that I've caused harm by misgendering them, getting their name wrong, or not advocating for them in the way that they need me to advocate for them, the discomfort that I'm feeling is, am I experiencing harm or am I experiencing discomfort, right? Because I think that oftentimes I've just seen a lot of cis folks just get really stuck in just how painful it is to hear that news, and then to think like, oh, but like now I'm the one being harmed and I'm the one who needs support and I'm the one who needs to be reassured by the trans person I'm tasked with supporting that I'm a good person and that, you know, I'm deserving of respect and love and care, right? When in reality, the person that is entirely inappropriate, and the person that you should be, the folks you should be getting that reassurance from are other cis folks, right? And I think truly, if we are putting that that experience on the scale of discomfort to harm, what we're talking about is really intense discomfort and not actually harm. Right?
Awesome. Beautiful. Ari, do you feel like you kind of answered it, or do you want to add more?
I add a little bit, just like from like a personal standpoint of like, I feel like systematic culture has made me a lot of things. I feel like it's made me like brave because I have to like be in this really unsafe world and just show up as myself fully every time, no matter what's gonna happen to me. It's made me like creative and um, patient because I've had to deal with like cis folks and like other privileged folks and really help them see the way forward sometimes, or like really get like try to guide us to a better place. So yeah, I don't know. It's made me a lot of really. I think some of the beautiful parts of who I am today are forged, or sort of forged in fire in a way through this, and I think that it also makes me, yeah, I think it's made me like a better support system for the people in my life too. So I don't know, I would just like remember all those like little gifts that you may not see in somebody who's like struggling at the moment, but like there's so much there that I think people are taking away from this world that is maybe not given under the best circumstances, but our gifts held together are all the same. So I'll just like remember that.
Definitely. All right. We're going to move in, try to get at least one of these questions answered. And panelists, if you want to go in and type an answer to any of these, go ahead. We did have someone volunteer to answer this question. What has helped you all the most in your journey to build and craft your gender? Gender is very personal. And what are the most important tools you've used and recommended to other people, peers?
Yeah, I can try and take this one on. Yeah, I love this question. I think that first and foremost, looking for resources created by and for other trans folks. I think that there are a million resources out there, and because of cisnormative culture, a lot of them are produced by cis folks, right? But it's a really great idea to start from a centering of trans folks as when we're talking about gender and explorations of gender. I think also, you know, media is super helpful. Looking for examples of like positive trans representation. There's not a lot, but there is some out there, and it can be really helpful just to see yourself on screen and to get verification that like you exist and you're having your identities reflected back to you. You know, and I think also seeking out mentors, right, where we can, from you know, I'm thinking, especially, you know, as like an Asian trans person, I come from a culture where our elders are really foundational to our culture and the structures of our culture. So one thing that's really important for me is to find Asian elders who see me and who respect my identities, especially Asian trans elders is really helpful. Those relationships are places where I feel all of my identities coming together in a really beautiful way. And that mentorship is really invaluable to me.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. So we had a question also that was, I'm not actually going to read the whole question, but the overall idea was like, how was it to converse with your parents whenever you had started to realize your identity? How did you conduct that conversation and the relationship and stuff like that as it follows from your coming out?
Yeah, it was to the part about like how hard was it? Like, what was it difficult? It was definitely a very challenging thing at first, I think. I think that like, I think there's a very like strong sort of culture of like family first, no matter what they do to you, even if they're like toxic. Um, but I don't know, I just sort of like, it got less scary as I went on. Like, came out as like queer first, and then like came out as non-binary, and came out as a trans woman. And by the last time, I was just like, this is like a newsletter. I'm just letting you know, like, I'm not asking for permission or like anything like that. This is purely just an update, in case you were interested, if you're still reading. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a way to. I think that for me, it's never, if somebody's like sharing something deeply personal about their gender with somebody, it's never to like upset the other person, because it's not like about the other person. Um, and so I think that's the key thing for that I would take away is like, even if somebody's upset by somebody coming out as trans, um, the person honestly needs to like do some reflecting, and like some other people in that person's life need to bring that person in and like hold them accountable to growth. But it's not the person who's coming out, it's not their fault. And that responsibility to like change everybody else's mind, it should not be on them. Even if they were there for, even if they are parents. Yeah, that's what I would say is that.
Beautiful. And we're actually at time.